Hello, my name is Michael Yannick. I'm a German political researcher. Today I want to talk about the socialism in National Socialism. And yes, Hitler was a socialist. And socialism is always left-wing. Here are some quotes of famous German historians and scientists. Professor Dr. Arnulf Baring, renowned historian, political scientist, and recipient of the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany, one of the highest honors the German government can give. He said, the Nazis weren't right-wing, the Nazis were a left-wing party. Professor Philipp Bagus, professor of economics. In practice, Hitler wanted to make everyone equal. The common good takes precedence over self-interest. That's the National Socialists' slogan. It's a socialist slogan. People are indoctrinated with socialist ideas. Of course, there is also nationalistic ideas. There's international socialism and there's national socialism. Of course, they are also competitors. Yes, they are competitors within their own camp. And of course they hate each other. Of course they kill each other. Yes, but they are socialists. There's a collectivism. The common good takes precedence over self-interest. There's also central planning. Yes, there were 4 or 5 years plans that were made for the German industry. Industry is centrally planned. Formally, the entrepreneurs remain the owners of their companies, but the state decides which raw materials they receive and which workers they are allocated and what they have to produce.
In summary, Professor Philipp Bagus explains that Nazis shared socialist ideals and philosophy, that they veered towards central economic planning, and that their ideology was basically left-wing.
Professor Dr. Joachim Fest, historian and Hitler biographer. In Italy during the 1920s and 30s, traditional class distinctions still existed, while Hitler, like socialists of all kinds, pushed forward with social conformity. When entire communist combat units, united, joined the SA in the spring of 1933, this was by no means perceived as a breach by the Communist Party soldiers. It became a popular joke to call these units storms of meatballs, brown on the outside, red on the inside, which reveals how close to one another the public perceived these two groups to be. They were, so to speak, merely changing the leader and the flag, not even their meeting place. At heart, they remained socialists. Only now they were also allowed to be nationalistic, no longer a traitor to the fatherland, according to the Comintern. Overall, the discussion about the political position of National Socialism has never been thoroughly conducted. Instead, numerous attempts have been made to deny any connection between the Hitler movement and socialism. To distance communism as much as possible from National Socialism, even the totalitarian character of communism was denied for a considerable time.
In summary, Professor Dr. Joachim Fest shows that the Nazis shared a common goal with other socialists, that they were perceived as a close match to the communists, and he also points out the many attempts that were made to hide the connection between these two groups.
Sebastian Haffner, historian. By the way, Winston Churchill was so impressed by Haffner's anti-national socialist book, Germany, Jekyll and Hyde, from 1940, that he made it a required reading for the ministers in his wartime cabinet. And Sebastian Haffner said, the only domestic opponents or rivals with whom Hitler had to seriously reckon and at times struggle against between 1930 and 1934 were the conservatives. And this remained the case even after his absolute power was established in 1934. It was the only opposition that gave him trouble until the very end. the only one that had even a slim chance of bringing him down, and the only one that at least once attempted to do so. And this opposition came from the right. From their perspective, Hitler was on the left. It is by no means as easy to put Hitler on the right side of the political spectrum as so many people have grown accustomed to do today. He was certainly no Democrat, but he was a populist, a man who based his power on the masses, not on elites. In a certain sense, a people's tribune who had come to power. His most important means of domination was demagogy, and his instrument of power was not a structured hierarchy, but a chaotic bundle of uncoordinated mass organizations, held together only by his person at the top. All these traits are more left-wing than right-wing. Clearly, among the dictators of the 20th century, Hitler ranks between Mussolini and Stalin, and on closer inspection, more close to Stalin. Nothing is more misleading than simply calling Hitler a fascist.
To summarize, historian Sebastian Haffner points to Hitler's rivalry with the right, shows that his power came from the masses, not the elites, notes on the left-wing approach to ruling the Nazi Party adopted, and places Hitler rather closer to Stalin than to Mussolini.
Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, political scientist and historian. It is not necessary that the state owns everything. You can do it with regulations, with taxes, and so on. And this is the modern form of socialism. In this way, yes, Adolf Hitler was a socialist, but a modern socialist. Stalin became more and more his role model. He admired the planned Soviet economy more and more. This is what happened in the 30s and especially in the 40s. It was more and more his idea, after we win the war, we have to go much more in the direction of a planned economy, because only a planned economy will solve our problems. So, this was his plan. He said nationalism and socialism are the same, because it means the priority of politics, the priority of the state. First, there is the common interest, and the individual interest is subordinated to this. First, there is the nation, the collective, and so, in a way, nationalism is the same as socialism. This was his philosophy.
In summary, Dr. Rainer Zitelmann explains how Hitler's was a modern form of socialism, shows how Stalin was Hitler's role model, illustrates his vision of having the state take control over everything, and references Hitler's speech about placing the collective interests over those of the individual.
Professor Dr. Peter Hoeres, historian and political scientist. The phrase "the enemy is on the right" was used as a Nazi slogan. It appeared in Nazi newspapers and such. The Nazis fought against the reactionaries. They hated each other. The reactionaries are what we would call right-wing today. And this theme runs through Goebbels' diary. There are many statements by Hitler that point in this direction and so on, but they did have the idea of creating a specific form of socialism. However, it wasn't internationalist. He was a specific type of socialist. He embodied and implemented a specific form of socialism.
In summary, Professor Dr. Peter Hoeres points out that the Nazis acknowledged that they were fighting the right-wing enemy, and shows that they favored a specific form of socialism, not the traditionally international, but rather a national socialism.
Professor Hans-Hermann Hoppe, historian, social researcher, and economist. Hitler's, movement was definitely socialist. The National Socialists had to destroy Marxism, not in spite, but because of its affinity to itself.
To summarize, Professor Hermann Hoppe claims that Hitler was definitely a socialist, and that he fought Marxists simply because it was too close a competition to his own ideology.
Thank you very much. Please follow this channel, like and subscribe.